have a new foster child coming to your home, here today we're going to talk about what you might need to know. I remember it well. I was getting my hair done, and right in the middle, I got a call that a child was coming to my home. I didn't get my hair dried. I barely got it rinsed, and I ran out the door, and as soon as I got to my house, there was a child plunked on my doorstep. Today, we're going to cover a lot. So I'm going to talk a little bit fast, so stay with me. We are going to talk about all things foster kids. When you first get that initial placement, we're going to talk about the children, the who, what, when, and where they may come to your home. We're going to talk about what you might need when a first child comes to your home, about social workers, and about the kids themselves. And stay tuned to the end to my final thoughts, where I just kind of wrap up all this information and share our personal experience with you. So when will you be getting those calls for your very first, or maybe one of your numerous foster care placements? I had someone message me the other day, and I was discussing this with them, and they were wondering, like, should I be on alert? Should I, maybe hold all my calls? Are they going to call me within the first 5 minutes after I get licensed? There can be so many questions about the foster parent calls. A lot does depend on whether you're working with a private agency or whether you're working directly with the state. So your calls, if they come through a private agency, they will likely come through one specific number that you can put into your phone, and you will know who that is when you pick up that phone or when that phone initially rings. A lot of the calls will come between 9 and 5. If you're doing receiving care or emergency placements, which is taking a child, they initially come into placement, that may come later on at night or maybe on the weekends or sometimes even in the middle of the night. What we personally have found over the years is that Monday earlier, a lot of phone calls come in for kids, and that is because kids may come into care over the weekend, and so in the morning they may have a meeting to assess where the best placement is or who they should call to place this child, and then later on in the morning, on Monday mornings, we'll get calls to be able to take foster kids. Another time that kids often need to be placed is Friday afternoons, and sometimes it's really late on Fridays. They may have been looking for a home all week, they couldn't find a placement, and in order to prevent that child from having to go maybe to a group home if it's older, or in our state, a lot of kids that are older end up in hotels for the weekend because there's just not enough foster homes. They will cram out the calls and call as many foster parents as they can to try to place children. So where will those placement calls come from? Again, if you're with a private agency, they will likely come from your agency and through one direct number, a social worker, if you have someone working directly with you to place a child. If you're working with the state like we have for the past 15 years, we get calls from all different departments. So each city or each region, it has its own office. It has its own placement workers within that office. And those placement workers, you will soon get to know them really well, especially if you're taking kids short term or like rapid turnover kids or multiple kids into your home. Those placement workers may each have different phone numbers. Those offices may have different phone numbers that you're getting calls from. You may also get a call from maybe a social worker. Usually in our county, social workers will direct a placement call to the placement worker or the coordinator that will call you to be able to see if you're able to take a child. But there are times where a placement worker, if you're talking to them, they will direct you to a social worker because that social worker will have a bigger portfolio or a bigger understanding of that child and that child's needs. So my suggestion to you is if you are looking to get placed with a foster child, to pick up your phone. There's been times where we have gotten texts, maybe from a licensor that has been searching for a home for a particular child or maybe a social worker, but generally speaking, we get calls from the placement desk. Each of those are different depending on what region you're in. They may even be in a whole different county if there's a huge need. Like for us, it would be in the city of Seattle. There's lots of kids and not enough foster parents. So they may be out of your city, they may be out of your region, but pick up your phone and answer because that's how you're going to get placed with children. Another option, if you're working with the state or even if you're working with a private agency, is to get on the list of emails. They send out emails. I get them generally every single day of kids that are in care, that need homes. They may be medically fragile kids or older kids, or they may just be even typically developing kids, depending on the need and how many foster homes and families are available. And so make sure to get on that list, either through your private agency or with your state, so that you can receive emails that will give you more information. You can request a chipper or a more detailed understanding about those children. And so you will want to look that way as well. And in those cases, you would contact the social worker directly. There should be a phone number, a contact information, or the placement worker, and they can give you more information on a child. So what are some reasons why we may get phone calls for kids to come into care? And I'm sure you could guess this. I'm just going to give you a little bit about our experience and some of the reasons why kids come into care. As you probably know, if you're licensed, they will come into care because of neglect or because of abuse. They may come into care because there's been a domestic violence situation that they've observed, or their house has been raided and they found drugs and it's just unkept, or maybe it's a teacher that has called on a child because that child has made a complaint or made some kind of statement that shows that that child is in danger. There are other situations, however, why kids might come into foster care. One example may be that that child, when it was unfit or unable to live with their biological parents, they went to live with a grandparent. And this is becoming, from what we've seen, way and way more frequent, simply because of just the drug epidemic that's going on in our nation. When that happens, grandparents can either find themselves in a predicament if they don't have a big support system, if those kids get older, maybe toddlers or maybe preteens, or maybe they may have health problems. They may relinquish those children into the foster care system. Another example is if that grandparent or maybe that relative has been caring for that child, but they've come down with some kind of crisis, maybe a divorce, or maybe they need to move out of state, or they're in the military and they need to move across the country. Another example, they may have health problems, they may have cancer, or they may have even passed away. And so those kids are placed into foster care to, of course, look for any other family or any other relative that they can go to. But if not, they will be in need of a foster home. A last example for why kids may come into care is because there are situations where, we have one in particular, to where there was a parent that came across the border and they were here, they brought their kids here, and they decided to go back to Mexico. Or maybe a parent decides to leave the country. They don't want to take the child. They feel like it's not safe. They don't have support, or they don't have finances. And so they abandon the child here in the States into the foster system. There may be a situation where someone abandons a child, or maybe they gave birth to an infant and they left that infant in a park and that child is found. And so abandonment is another example for when kids may come into foster care and you may get that call for one of your placements. So who are these kids that you may get called about when you get a phone call from your state agency or your private agency? Who are these kids? A lot of kids come into care with siblings. A lot of times because of drugs, there isn't a lot of choices or a lot of maybe focus on preventing pregnancy. And so moms will have babies and maybe babies again. And so these kids come into care with siblings. If you are a foster parent or think about being a foster parent and have the heart or the capacity or the desire to take siblings, I highly encourage you to do that. Single child foster children often have a greater chance to be able to go into a home, have stability and consistency. But imagine coming into care and your sibling, the only person that you've known and been with, maybe your parents were out doing drugs and left you in the apartment for days. It's the only one you've been near. And those children need to stick together. So siblings is a great group of kids that may be coming into care when you get your foster parent call. So who else might need placement? Older foster kids, absolutely. Please don't be afraid of a middle school and high school age and elementary school age. Everybody wants the babies. Everybody feels safe or like they can handle a baby. But these older kids, they're so endearing and they can be so sweet and engaging, and they need foster homes as well. In foster care, we in our state of Washington State, we have a capacity of 6 kids that can be in a home with a parent. And so that would include adopted kids or biological kids. It used to be 8, and they shrunk that number down a little bit. If you have 6 kids or plan on getting 6 foster kids, there are circumstances where the state may give you allowance to expand that. If a sibling comes into care, if they have a child that they just can't place, they may expand your license to take more kids as well. Another thing I think new foster parents don't really think about is that if you are maybe licensed for 0 to 2 and you get a call for a 3-year-old, or you're a teacher and there's a child in your class that's maybe 10 years old that needs a home, you are not limited to 0 to 2 years old. You can expand your license. You can talk to your licensor and ask them to expand the age, and they will approve a child, especially again if it's an older child or a child that really needs a home. They will expand the age range. So don't be afraid to, ask the placement worker, can I talk to my licensor? Or will the social worker go to my licensor and get this child, regardless of their age, approved to come into my home? And so the state does have rules. They have guidelines that they're supposed to follow. But if there's a child that needs a home, a lot of times that child will hold precedence, and there can be a little bit of wiggle room depending on the situation. And so make sure to ask to be able to really meet the needs of the kids that are coming into care in your specific town. We are going to move on to the second section, which is what to get. You're getting ready to have your first placement. What do you get for that child? Wow, this is a big question, and I know there's probably so many videos on this, and I might even be a little unique when it comes to this. As a foster parent over all of these years, I used to go out and shop and spend enormous amounts of money before a child would come. I was nervous. I wanted to have some kind of control and to make sure that I had everything that it needed and maybe even didn't need. It gave me some kind of contentment and peace and made me feel a little like, okay, I have some power. I'm in charge, even though I had no idea who that child was that was coming into my home. What I found is, even if you ask an age of a child or the size of a child, children are unique. Every single child, the child that weighs maybe 50 pounds, one can be long and skinny and one can be a little bit wider and tinier, or, one can be disproportionate in a certain way, especially older children. You have so many different sizes. You have different preferences for that child. You may have a girl that comes to your home and she does not like dresses. She wants to dress in jeans and t-shirts. Or you may have a boy and he wants to just kind of deck out and dress up and dress really, really fancy, or maybe not like itchy sweaters. And there's just so many variables when it comes to kids. I used to have boxes and boxes and store them in my garage, and it was just laborsome. The amount of clothes that I used out of there was so minimal because I did end up shopping for kids once kids came into care. And so unlike a lot of foster parents, and maybe even some of the ones that are sharing videos here on YouTube, they will likely tell you that to stock up on anything and everything. But for me personally, I just don't like to do that. I generally really like to wait to shop. A couple things that I do have on hand is car seats, a variety of different car seats, because it just pays in the long run. I can't go get a new car seat for a child. And there's really only so many sizes that I need. We really focus on younger kids generally, not always, but generally. So that's something that I do keep on hand. And another thing is to make sure that I have enough beds, so that I have a crib or a playpen, a bed that I can set up at the last minute if there's a need for a placement to come into my home. I also really like to have a lot of blankets on hand. I'm kind of gender neutral, if you will, maybe grays or earth tones, because again, kids are super unique. Some may like soft fluffy ones. Other ones may need a little bit of a heavier blanket or a bigger blanket. And so I like to have a ton of blankets. That's just me personally. Each foster parent's different, and you go with your gut and you get what you feel like you need to get. But for me, I just like to be pretty minimal until that child comes into my home. So when that first placement, it does I do end up going shopping. I generally don't take the child with me because I've already had a lot of changes. Kids can get overstimulated if they've maybe never, been a lot of places, and going into a store with a lot of lights, a lot of stimulation, it can really affect a foster child. I like to give, again, just kind of a real basic entry into my home. And so a lot of times my husband will stay home and I'll try to run to the store really quick or wait till nap time. When kids have come into my home all these years, most of the kids come with generally nothing. That's changing a little bit as churches are becoming aware, and there's consignment shops and places for foster parents to shop, if you will, for your foster child. So that can change depending where you live. But generally, children don't come with anything. I've had kids come with just a t-shirt on their back. When they do come with clothes, they may say, the social worker may say, well, they have a lot of clothes. Wait until that child comes, until you look through their bag. I've had kids come with a whole bag of clothes, and I'm all excited thinking, yay, they have something familiar, something that smells like home. So, even pajamas that they can feel safe when they go to bed, because those pajamas are familiar. They're not itchy or new or uncomfortable to that child. They're the kind of pajamas that child will like, and I know it will help them to be soothed and go to sleep well. But what I found is a lot of times the clothes may stink like smoke, which is not healthy or good for any child, or they don't fit. They're way too big. They're way too small. I've also had a lot of clothes come where they have holes in them, or they're ripped, or they're stained. And for me personally, that's just kind of a line that I draw. I don't like kids that are in ripped clothes or stained clothes, and I will set those aside and I will go get something brand new for that child. So another great place to shop may be a consignment shop. It may be a foster, resource center where they have clothes lined up and you can get them. You may request things online if you have family or friends that have old clothes. Buy, sell, and trade. There's a lot of great online resources, especially with foster parents and within the community, to where someone has grown out of a bed and so they donate it for free. But then when they have a need, they go there and then they get back what they need. And so it's kind of this exchange. Lastly, we really love Amazon. Amazon Prime is so great because you get items within a few days. You don't have to take a child that maybe is already pretty traumatized and is adjusting to your home and take them out into a store where there can be just overstimulation and a lot of lights and sounds and people, and they can maybe feel triggered or unsafe. The items and whatever you need to purchase will come straight to your front door. And a lot of times we get it maybe in a day or 3 days, usually at the most, if it is Prime. And so it's just a great option. I will link Amazon below if you want to consider getting things for your foster child. And let's move on to the children themselves. Who are the kids that you are going to get placed in your home? What will they be like? What will they think? And how will they act? And really, I wish that there was some kind of math formula or, some basic criteria that can guarantee that your child will behave a certain way or act a certain way. Kids behave all different ways when they've come into my home. One in particular, I opened up the front door. It was late in the evening. This little boy was tired, and the first thing that he did was grab me around my neck, gave me a great big hug. He didn't let go, and then he just melted and sat in the middle of my lap. I sat crisscross applesauce right there on the wood floor in the middle of my entryway. He laid his head on my shoulder and he fell asleep. The social worker ended up sneaking off and just kind of whispering goodbye, and I sat there for what felt like an hour or 2 hours as he just slept and slept. He knew that he was safe. He knew he was going to be loved, and he was content. I was content. He ended up waking up, and I went over and sat in a different chair, and he slept for another couple hours. The first couple days, he was just exhausted. He had been through so much. And so these kids might come into your home tired. They may come into your home hungry if they haven't gone to maybe the department first or gotten their basic needs met. They may be starving and may ask for food. They maybe have been in an apartment or a small space, and the moment they come to your house, they see a playground in the back and they want to run outside and play. Regardless of the structure of your home or, maybe strict rules that you have about playtime or certain things, I would give your child those first couple hours especially a lot of freedom. Give them freedom to pick out a snack, to be able to go play outside, to maybe pick out a toy that they could play with, and give them the space they need. If they need to have space from you to maybe evaluate, this home and these people and who are they. If they just need hugs and cuddles, give them hugs and cuddles as well. We've had lots of different kids. Some of them have raged for hours. Some of them have raged for days. Those first couple days, I would encourage you, don't plan on a lot of sleep that first night, because it can be really hard for these kids coming into a new home. And nighttime, I realize, is often a big trigger as well. It's a lot of times when families maybe do drugs or drink more, or where there's more violence, or maybe they're left at nighttime so their parents can go party, and they get really triggered at nighttime. We had one little child that every single evening, as soon as it got dark, they were terrified. They were so scared, and they didn't want to leave our side. They needed to know they were safe. A lot of times kids come in with maybe eating issues to where they haven't eaten, so they may gorge and may eat until they even throw up, or where they're gagging. You may have kids that have aversion or use food as a sort of control, or maybe sleep as a form of control as well. Again, give these children a lot of power and a lot of say those first couple days and initially when they come into your home. You may have a child that comes in and they're perfectly happy and content. They sit down on your floor, play with your toys. They may act like, nothing has happened. They haven't just lost their biological family or changed foster homes, and they're just adapting. And part of that depends on the child's situation. It depends on their personality or their coping mechanisms, how they cope or don't cope maybe with the situation. Some of the children may come into your home and they may feel violent or aggressive. We had a little girl who wanted to jump out of the car. The first couple hours that we had her, or she was angry and self-harming and really gouging her fingernails into her legs, because these kids have so many emotions and they don't know what to do with them. They don't know how to verbally express. They don't have the skills or the ability to articulate what is going on in their hearts. And so they project that out in behaviors. But they are telling you something with their behaviors. They're telling you maybe they're scared, or they're frightened, or they're cold, or they're hungry, or they're lonely, or they miss their family. So don't take those behaviors personally. It's not about you. You didn't do anything wrong, likely. It's not your home or anything that you did. Really, again, let that child lead and let them tell you through their behaviors what it is that child may need. Give them options if you need to say, are you hungry? Do you need this? Are you cold? Do you want your blanket? We had one little child that just cried, and we didn't realize that they had a blanket that was in their bag, in their diaper bag, that they're with all the time. And so really, again, try to get that child to tell you what they need. These children will be a blessing. They're beautiful, every single one of them, regardless of how they act. And these kids, they do adjust. Give them a little time, give them lots of patience and a lot of prayer, and they will adjust. And before you know it, they will feel like they fit and they are a perfect and beautiful part of your family. So social workers, let's talk about them for a moment. Social workers are so different. Every single one of them is unique. If you're with a private agency, likely you will have the same social worker that will stay with you, regardless of how many kids may come or go in your home. As a state licensed foster parent, each child will have a social worker that will be assigned to them. When you get your placement call and they bring a child maybe to your home, or you go pick it up, sometimes that person who will bring that child to your home may be a different social worker than the one that will stay with that child. And placement workers or social workers are so unique. You may have one that will come and sit on the floor, and they will sit and talk to you for an hour, and they will play with the child, make sure that it's transitioning well into your home. You may have another one that wants to see your whole entire house, or may ask you lots of questions, or maybe talk a lot about the past of that child, or maybe about a situation that child was in, so that you could better parent that child. You may also have social workers, like one of them that, really just dropped a child off in the middle of the street to me. They pulled up in an old Camaro, and they had crazy wild hair, and they just reeked like smoke, and they just handed a child and pretty much walked away. You may meet social workers in public places. Parking lots tend to kind of be a place where they transition children a lot. It may be at the department. Please be gracious and humble and kind to these social workers. We don't know what they have experienced. They may have just brought a child from a drug situation, or, maybe a child was just hit or experienced some kind of domestic violence, or maybe their parents overdosed and they sat in a closet for 2 days. I mean, you just never know the situations and the experiences that these social workers have gone through. I would highly recommend when the social worker comes to make sure that you're signing a piece of paper so that you verify that you have legal rights to this child. If you need to take them to a doctor, you may get a voucher or some kind of a document assuring you that you can take that child to get medical treatment or medical care. If a child has newly come into care, they may also give you a voucher for clothes that may be $50 to maybe $250, depending where you live. If you don't get that and that child is new to care, make sure to request that, because that child is due to those funds. And sometimes social workers just don't offer those. I've noticed actually a lot, so you may need to request that. And that's another great reason why not to go out and spend a lot of money, because the state does have allocated funds that will go to meeting the basic needs of the foster children when they come into your home. My biggest advice to you would be that when that social worker does come to your home, to ask them as many questions as you can. That child's case, their situation is really fresh, whether they've come from a different foster home, whether they've maybe come from a biological family member's home. And again, if that social worker is not the primary social worker to that child, they're just transporting, they may be a lot more open to share things about that child than maybe somebody else. Always be friendly and engaging and grateful and really humble with those social workers, because can you imagine taking a child from everything they've known, or maybe from another foster home that child has loved and maybe thought that they were going to stay in, and moving them to a different location? It's hard work. Some of these social workers drive with kids raging in the car, or they have crying babies, and sometimes they drive them for hours. And so be really gracious and humble and loving again to these social workers, because they do hard work and we value and appreciate them. And these are my final thoughts. When we first were licensed to be foster parents, we wanted to kind of have some kind of control. We wanted to buy the right things and do the right things and prepare for the right child and get the right social worker. But what we realized is it was less about really what we had and what we prepared for, and more about just letting go, just trusting that the children that would come into our home are the ones that were meant to be there. And if they were there, we were equipped and able to care for them. We realized that possessions really mean nothing externally, and what matters most is that we're emotionally and mentally equipped and prepared to care for these kids. We realize that even the hardest social worker going through the toughest time, they can really have hearts of gold, and they can be the most loving and gracious people that you will meet. We've learned not to put really strict rules or walls or ceilings on anything, and really just to trust and to let go and really give God this call that we are all led to become foster parents. As we step out in faith and we trust Him, we realize that He knows the time that a child is going to come into your home. He knows the situation that child has gone through. He's already prepared the way. He's prepared our hearts. And so when we look to Him, it can be a good and a beautiful thing. There's been times where we've gone out and maybe bought an outfit, like we didn't even have a child, and really just felt prompted and led to buy that outfit, or maybe a certain car seat or a certain toy. And then a few days or a few hours or maybe a few weeks later, we would get a child that would match that outfit or need that toy. And it was like, as we began to really abandon our thinking and our will and give up our control, we found that there is a God that is bigger, that knew the way, and He would make sure to provide all the things that we need for that placement, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. So I just want to encourage you, go out, be blessed, pray most of all for your foster kids. It's the best thing you could do. Pray that God would prepare your heart, that he would prepare that child, that social worker, that judge that will be ahead of that case. And just don't be afraid, because it is a beautiful thing when a child comes into a home and they are safe and they are loved, and you are doing just that. Make sure to comment below if you have specific questions or ideas or thoughts, or maybe things I didn't mention about getting your first foster placement. I would love to answer those questions for you. And remember, go out, be blessed, live bold, and be brave. And we will see you next time. Subscribe below for more videos like this. Thanks so much.